Around burnt trunks is a halo of light. A glorious past even today is bright. And on your lashes trembles a tear. In it is hidden the reflection of that new dawn that is the coming tomorrow. In her homecoming to Pakistan after her 7-year exile, it seems that Riaz keeps searching for a sense of belonging, and her exile never ends. In a nation lurching amidst state-created disasters and a rush towards commercialism, to write from a state of internal exile, where something new out of the lost may be created, a traveling takes place to the roots, to record the world before it ceases to exist. Riaz seeks an anchor in the love and pathos of Rumi, and in her move towards translating other literatures into Urdu. This translation also seems a turn away from the body in her poetry, providing possibilities of breaking physical bonds and reaching heights of abstract thought. There is an unpredictability, a limit in these possibilities, which an equally unstable task, as Riaz translates ineffable expressions between languages. On the impossibility of translation, Riaz says, quote, "There's not a single word in any of the languages I translate that can map perfectly onto a word in English. So it's always interpretive, approximate, creative. Anything that is itself a linguistic quality will by definition be anchored in a particular language, whether it's idiom, ambiguity, or assonance," unquote. Despite the compactness of the lyric and the selection of precise, elusive vocabulary and the economy of imagery, paradoxically, in conjunction with her short lyrics, Riaz seems to spin ever more expansive poems set in cycles mimicking and echoing her own earlier poems. In lyrics that return to recurring subjects through what critics call dialogic frames in her poetry, in conversation with herself, her translation between languages, traditions, and genre illuminates her celebration of justice, peace, and love. Her last collection of poems, written between 2001 and 2015, originally titled Mosmo ke Daire Mein, and a poem inspired by Sheikh Ayaz, eventually acquires the title Tum Kabir. The title poem is an apostrophe to her son, a long poem of mourning the death of his young son and accepting his loss in the will of God, the last addressee of the poem's title. There are also poems addressed to political figures and revolutionary iconoclast poets, George Maliabadi and John Alia, and this means poems incorporating lyrics by canonical poets written to Mir, Zauq, and Shefta. There are 2 Marsiyas, a shorter one connecting the mausoleum of Zainab to the apocalyptic invasion of Iraq in Roza-e Hazrat Zainab, and a longer Marsiya, Hazrat Zainab ka khutba Sham ke darbar mein, a call against injustice by the woman who becomes her nation's leader, the crowning glory of feminism for Riaz. Her popular poems are also included, like Naya Bharat, Am Ki Asha, and Bhagat Singh Ki Murat, on the nationalist investment in perpetual war in Pakistan and India, and the spread of intolerance in the subcontinent. Naya Faisla, New Decision for the Women's Rights Movement, is a play in verse on a sexually assaulted woman who refuses to fall into the narratives determined for her by society and wills her survival in these triplicate lines that end the poem. And this is ironically a repetition of lines she had written 30 years ago in a poem, These Janam Sagar 30 Years in the Ocean of Light. So the poems that close this, the lines that close this poem are जवाला बनकर खोलेंगे जो आंसू आंख से टूटे हैं जवाला बनकर खोलेंगे जो आंसू आंख से टूटे हैं जवाला बनकर खोलेंगे जो आंसू आंख से टूटे हैं Volcanoes will erupt from these tears that fell from eyes. Volcanoes will erupt from these tears that fell from eyes. Volcanoes will erupt from these tears that fell from eyes. In an earlier poem of hers, Inqalabi Aurat, the constantly reinventing woman, mobilizing for new revolutions, looks at her aging face in a mirror of water, and is perpetually caught in the mesh of her fitra to struggle between revolution or madness. In the eponymous short poem ending the book, Fahmida Riaz ek Shaira, Fahmida Riaz a poet, She adopts a self-mocking tone towards the fickleness of fame, for a poet discomfited by the recitation of her lines by a fan, and ultimately surpassed by forces larger than herself, is interested in the connection of poet to reader. So I translated this poem, but I don't think I have time to read that, because I want to get to, I just got the translation, is that okay?
Yes.
Okay. People have started saying she's popular. I too desire meeting her sometimes, but the thing is, the desire to meet the popular, the illustrious, has been in my heart nor ever will be. It is also said, if you meet such characters in actuality, you will be often disappointed. Her poems, though, I remember many by rote. If I recite them, she might say, this is enough. This much familiarity with this poet will suffice, independent of her being or not being spread in every direction of me, his life. So now we're going to see this last poem, Daftar-e-Imkan, which was recited by her sister, Najma Manzoor, just this year at a at the literary festival.
इस कमरे में एक खिड़की है। घर रात को मेरी आँख खुले, मैं मुड़कर उसको तकती हूँ, तब मुझे दिखाई देता है, खिड़की में चाँद चमकता है। मैं हौले से मुस्काती हूँ और मुझको ऐसा लगता है वो चाँद भी जैसे मुस्काया, फिर मूंद के अपनी आँखों को हौले हौले सो जाती हूँ। और मुझे ख्याल ये आता है मैं नहीं अकेली दुनिया में, ये कायनात और ये तारे, चाँद और सूरज के नज़ारे, ये मोटर कार की आवाज़ें, अनजान परों की परवाज़ें हैं एक ही गौर से ये बनी, जो मेरा भी है तेरा भी, जो इसका भी है उसका भी, मैं नहीं अकेली दुनिया में। ये फहमीदा की आखिरी नज़्म थी।
Her last poem, Daftar-e-Imkan, takes its title from a verse of one of Khalid's ghazals. Yak kadam dahshat se dastar, yak kadam dahshat se dars Daftar-e-Imkan khula, jada ajzae do alam dasht ka shiraza tha. Which Surinder Deol translates as, when I put my foot into the frenzy, I discovered a world of possibilities. The thread that binds this world and the other, this wilderness. This last of her poems also opens up a world of possibilities. As the poet-lover sets out on the unknowable, frenetic path to Ishq-e-Hakiki, volumes and worlds of possibilities scroll out for her in this last stage before union. A poet of modern sensibilities, Riaz contemplates the moon smiling outside her window and establishes connection with both humanity and God. I'm not alone in the world. This universe and the stars, the visions of the sun and the moon, these sounds of cars, the flight of unseen wings, are made of the same pearl, that is mine and yours, that is his and hers. I'm not alone in the world. From the language of stones to an effigy of clay to worlds of possibilities, her poetry is the archive of possibilities. A hope torn from the elements, the blue sky of tomorrow, the resplendent flame of revolution. The generosity of her spirit encompasses the radical and the downtrodden, the desert of affliction and the possibility of ecstasy. The defiance of her spirit is in the epigraph to Sablal Gohar, itself inspired by Faz's well-known nazm, Shishonka Masiha Koi Nahi, in which Faz instigates readers to pick up their shattered dreams and fight injustice. She infuses it with a playful twist on what resistance, the call to arms, sounds from a triumphant woman's perspective. Sab shishe sagar lalo gohar, daman mein chupaye baiti hoon. Sab sabat salam hain ab tak ek rang jamaye baiti hoon. ये नाजुक मोती इज्जत का और ईमान कांच का ये पुतला, ये सागर दिल का सुर्ख कवल लबरेज में अहमर से हुआ। चटखे ना खराश आई इन पर, तुम इनकी सफा देखो तो जरा, है झल झल इनकी आब वही और जगमग इनकी वही ज़रा। पथराव था चौमुख उन पर भी, टकराई थी उनसे भी दुनिया, दो निस्वानी बाहों ने मगर देखो हर पत्थर छीन लिया। All mirrors, goblets, gems and jewels I sit hiding in my lap. Still all are safe and whole, I sit enraptured. This delicate pearl of honor and faith, this glass puppet, this red lotus of the heart's goblet, forever spilling with red wine, never shattered or faced a crack. See their purity? Their splendor the same glare, their light the same dazzle. They too were stoned from every direction. The world also collided with them. But two female arms have, look, borne every stone.
That was wonderful. It was just absolutely wonderful. So I'm going to ask Shaila Naqvi, Dr. Shaila Naqvi, to come up here and to talk about her favorite person, Mahmida Riaz. As I think I mentioned to some of you, Shaila Naqvi is a physician by profession, but her soul is the soul of a poet and a writer. And she writes fiction and poetry and has published a book of poetry titled Naqli Maryam. Do you have any copies? You should always bring copies with you. Who knows who might want to buy. So her topic is Mahmida Riaz, Rebellion Against Patriarchy. Shaila Naqvi. Yeah, no, you should sit.
I think for him they did.
My interpretation of Mahmida and bringing her to life in front of all of us. And when I talk about Mahmida, you realize that her work is so vast that we would practically not cover that. Mahmida was a beautiful lyrical poet who was also boldly anti-establishment and politically active. Reading Mahmida gives one reasons to re-evaluate long-held ideas and assumptions. In Pakistani society, patriarchy rules. In the middle-class Muhajir background that I shared with Mahmida, patriarchy was benevolent and loving. You did not dare hurt or humiliate your father or your brother who doted on you and treated you like a princess, well, at least till you defied them. By loving a man they did not approve of, or by refusing to marry the man, the perfect man they had chosen for you, an educated man, a good provider who shared their language, their religion, and the particular sect to which they belonged. After being married to this stranger, she should submit to him, sexually to him, and of course, it would kill them if you lost your virginity before it was sanctioned by God and society. So Mahmida loved and lost. But she had an arranged marriage. But she had already arrived on the literary scene, defying the patriarchal taboo against girls expressing romantic and sexual desires. The poetry she wrote as a teenager had broken new grounds in Urdu poetry, frankly describing a young girl's emotions. Several women followed her example, and the literary circles accepted this poetry in a condescending manner. Mahmida was always too much for the Urdu literary scene. Even in this early romantic collection of her poems, there is a poem, Guriya, the doll. She notes that her society prefers a doll to a woman. A doll to play with when you want and which can be put away when you don't want to play with it, which has no desires of her own. Uske nanne labon pe koi pyas nahi. After this thumb in the eye of patriarchy, Her next collection, Badan Darida, The Lacerated Body, as Kawish said, addressed the taboo subjects of female sexuality. The courageous manner in which it is broached never overwhelms the artistic beauty of her poetry. Badan Darida has a uniquely bitter and mocking poem, Bakira, the Virgin, in which Femida laughs through tears that she was forbidden to be close to the young man she loved, female virginity being an all-important to patriarchy. She invokes a wild image of bloody sacrifice in describing her deflowering. Part as she was for sex with her beloved, she has come into this marriage Virgo intacta. Her most famous poem, Lao Haath Apna, expresses a pregnant woman's exuberant joy and she is asking her partner to share her wonder, frankly showing gratitude for impregnating her. But her later poems acknowledge her ambivalence to her pregnancy by wondering how a red snake slithered into her being. स्याह बन में आ गया, ऐसे आ गया तू, कोई नाग जैसे, नर्म जिल्द वाला, सुर्ख जिल्द वाला, फिरे सरसराता. This clear phallic image can also be seen as challenging the norm of patriarchally endorsed arranged marriage and its acceptable, legitimate outcome of pregnancy. In her poem Duja Saya, she invokes a shadow between herself and her baby. इस कमरे में हम तन्हा हैं, ये दूजा साया किसका है? कैसा दोरी धार का खंजर पलने की डोरी से बंधा है, जिसमें मेरा लहू रचा था, उस तन पर क्यों लरज रहा है? She feels a dagger is tied to the cord meant to rock the cradle. She cannot accept marital sex without love. And there's a poem, Ishq to jiski tamannai thi. And in another poem she laments, मेरे बोसे वो मेरे झूठ से बोझल बोसे. So, and finally in her poem, एक औरत की हंसी, a woman's laugh, she says, उसके बदन में छुपी है उसकी आज़ादी. Her freedom is hidden in her body. And Femida wrote down this poem in my notebook as a message to me. She was of course a feminist, and as enunciated in her poem Aklima, she considers it a given that a woman has the same capabilities as any thinking, feeling being, and they should have the same rights as men. But she honored the traditional roles of women and said, I should say, for anyone who doesn't know, Aklima is supposed to be the sister of Adam. So what she says is that above her the uterus, and there is also a brain, and maybe the God should address that one too. So this was her message over here. She really honored the traditional roles of women, because as long as a woman is given a respectable place in society, as long as there are no limitations to what she wants to do, if she chooses to be a housewife, this is perfectly wonderful as far as Femida is concerned. She honored the traditional roles of women, celebrated the mother and homemaker in a very joyous poem describing her untiring efficiency and being the focus of her husband's love. Femida had an NGO, as Kawish indicated, producing books to raise women's consciousness, Wada Kitab Ghar. This also published books in Urdu describing female anatomy and methods of contraception. All these topics were an affront to the traditionalists as they purported to female sexual pleasure. And at the risk of showing myself off, Femida liked one of my shares so much that because it expressed what she was trying to say, and she put it in these publications. And it is खुशी एक हक भी है और फर्ज भी है. खुशी एक हक भी है और फर्ज भी है, निभाया फर्ज हमने हक को मांगा. That is, women should demand satisfaction, should demand happiness, and it is not only their right, it's their duty to ask for it. She spoke out against female genital mutilation and her house was surrounded threateningly by men from the minority group, which still practices female khatna in Pakistan. And so I always thought that speaking out when you feel threatened is the definition of bravery. So she was a very brave woman. And Femida translated the very bold voice of the Persian poet, Farsi poet, Farokh Farrokhzad. And I wanted to say the word poetess, which has gone out of fashion, but Femida liked the word shaira. And I think it voices what you say, that the poetry of women is different from men. So she says she likes the nominal of shaira rather than just shaira. When she translated the bold voice of Farokh Farrokhzad, and she felt as if Farokh was in the room with her. And just like you saw the picture of her Isma Chotai, she would just lay on her bed and write and translate. But what I'm saying is when you read Farokh, you find she has a lot of stuff about being impure. And Femida had no hang-ups about ritual purity or impurity, like the pure and the impure state of being. Because the concept of these states, common in Jewish religion as well as Muslims, they demean the women. Because these particular conditions relate to women, they're peculiar to them, whether it's menstruation or bleeding following delivery. And I would really like to know what woman has the audacity and guts to write this poem. वो एक ज़ने नापाक है, बहते लहू की कैद में, गर्दिश में माह साल की, दहकी हवस की आग में, अपनी तलब की चाक में ज़ाइदा इब्लीस थी, चलती उसी की राह में. She was an impure woman, imprisoned in her own flowing blood and the changes of months and years. She was trapped in her own fire of lust, and for what she sought, she went on the path of Shaitan or Satan, and from whom she had been born. She spoke out against injustices as a public intellectual, and she has a poem called Hashia. She points out that our history and the high values of our culture basically try to ignore the injustices and the merciless behavior that they have shown to women through the centuries. And she says this forms a black outline of your culture that you think is so high. This is I would say, women were basically virtually non-persons till about 2 generations ago. And like my father's sister had not been taught to write when my father was doing his PhD in USA. And it was not a unique example, there are other families who were like that. So they were taught to read Quran, but their cultured husbands went to prostitutes who were culturally sophisticated to converse with them, because their wives basically bore their children and took care of their households. And coming to this era, Femida writes a poem, Nina Aziz ke liye. For Nina Aziz, a young woman, probably from the northwestern portion of the country, but I am not sure, whose beheaded body was found. But it caused Femida to lament, this body is merely an instrument for increasing the tribal numbers. And मगर इसमें नई बात क्या है? वो औरत थी, सदा जिस पे चाबुक बरसते रहे, जो हर दौर में सरबुरीदा मसानों में लाई गई है, कभी भेंट बनकर पति की चिता पर जलाई गई है, कभी साहिरा का लक़ब देके जिंदा जलाई गई है. ये औरत का तन है, कबीलों की नस्लें बढ़ाने का आला है, उनकी हमीयत की बस एक अलामत. वो औरत का सर, वो लापता सर. So as I said, Iklima, it has come full circle. From that time to this time, the woman's head has no value, it's only the body which procreates. I left Femida's angriest poem for the end, which is Kali Chadar, and Kawish referred to it too. In this poem, she refuses to wear the black chadar, the black shroud that pious Muslim women don when they step out of their homes. She sarcastically says that she has not done anything shameful that she needs to hide her face. She points out that the sins that society tolerates are worthy of being covered with this black shame. The pain of polygamy, a practice which went to its extreme with the kings and rulers. She recounts the sexual exploitation of women who are used and then discarded. She speaks of sexual violence against prepubescent or and underage girls. These deplorable actions, she says, are the rotting corpse in the cloisters, and this black shroud should be spread over them or over this corpse. She is not hiding from them. She is a partner of a dependable man who has won her love. So, the word in this poem, she uses the word hujra. She uses the word Rishe Mubarak. She uses the word huzur. And all of these evoke a Muslim religious man. However, in her poetry, you never find the word mullah. You never find her attacking a Muslim religion by word, because the patriarchy and the suppression of women in her view was not due to this one religion. In this region of Indo-Pakistan, Nepal, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, women are mistreated regardless of which religion they belong to. And so she did not consider it as a religious thing, it was a cultural thing, and she did not pick out one religion to speak out against. Femida was a public intellectual in the traditional patriarchal society with an official aversion to new ideas and a repressive military regimes which hid behind religiosity. And in one of Femida's poems, she describes it's a tank leading the prayer. That is, if you have a mosque and it is the prayers are led by a mullah. No, there's a tank which is actually leading the prayers. The glorification of the army and its nuclear bomb is the maximal expression of patriarchy. So that's why I'm just bringing it up here. Femida wrote Zameen Ka Noha about the bomb because it was an underground explosion. So she imagines the earth as a woman's womb. And she says, Zameen ki kook ko insaan ne jala dala. Zameen ki kook ko इंसान ने जला डाला और अब खुशी से हवाओं में रक्स करता है. यानी what man has been doing to woman for a long time, now he is doing to the mother earth. She continued her efforts to improve the society that she belonged to and that she loved with all its shortcomings till the end. And when I see her last poems, I find that they are full of hope for the common man. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shala. That was really wonderful. I'm so happy that we are able to talk about Femida and learn so much about her from people who have studied her, who knew her, who have translated her work. And I think that one of the things that I'm very proud to have achieved during this time and the last couple of events that we had when she was here is to enhance the information people have about Femida Riaz. Not many people have known her as much as they should have. In Pakistan, few authors, few poets know her well, but she needs to be really widely read and widely known. I'm very happy to announce our next guest, Raza Rumi. Raza, could you please join us here? Raza Rumi is a writer and journalist, and actually kisi taaruf ke mohtaj nahi hai, as they say. He has edited several papers in Pakistan and has been a civil servant. He currently teaches at Ithaca College, where he directs the Center for Independent Media, and is also visiting faculty at Cornell Institute for Public Affairs. He's the author of many books and innumerable articles as well. Today he will talk to us about Kishwar Nahid, and you never sent me your title.
That's okay. there isn't
okay.
one.
But that's fine. I have no problem with that. Raza Rumi, aap idhar aa jaye ya wahan baithe?
It's good to be back. Thanks to you. It's, I think, the third time
Yes,
I'm here,
yes.
and I'm unlike the distinguished speakers through the day. I'm neither a scholar or a PhD in Urdu or pursuing one. This paper that I'm going to present, I mean, it's a work in progress, and actually, it's a response that I'd started writing. So I don't know if you are familiar that earlier this year there was a very successful and robust Aurat March which was taken out by young women in Pakistan, and it made several headlines, ruffled many a feather, and created a mini storm because here was a new generation of young women activists and feminists who took to streets in almost all major cities of Pakistan. And in the process, they also carried a lot of banners. They came up with some really bold expressions of not only their womanhood, but also kind of rattling and shaking up a lot of conventional and traditional opinion in Pakistan. So there was a whole debate in the media. They were threatened. FIRs were registered against these young women for obscenity, for violating the social conventions, the norms. And in that process, somehow, a mini controversy erupted because Kishwar Nahid, the eminent poet and writer and columnist and activist, and many other hats that she wears, apparently, well, allegedly gave a statement against those controversial banners that the young women were holding, the placards, etc. Some of them were cited as way too bold for the Pakistani society. So Kishwar Nahid made a remark or two someone who reported it in the media, and there was a whole backlash. So young people were very angry because they had been working on this march, and especially young feminists, they were very sort of dejected that here is someone with the stature of Kishwar Nahid and calling them out or using the same language that others were using. So I thought I should write about her, given that I have written a bit about her earlier and I know her personally, like many in the room do. And so this paper I started to write, and I could not finish it because I mean, once you start writing on someone like Kishwar Nahid, it's not very easy to either say something new which others have not, and Kawish just spoke earlier. I mean, her translations of Kishwar Nahid are so well known, and her work. So anything that you venture to put in writing has to be kind of saying something new. But anyway, I tried, and so it's a response where I'm just kind of reviewing her life and work for a younger audience, and I hope to finish it soon and get it published somewhere. Let's see. So I begin with it's a self-titled poem called Kishwar Nahid, and it's English translation. Kishwar Nahid, a pearl oyster with sealed lips, women of the past, women of today, afflicted, you speak from the shore to the winds of life's ocean, to move the feet of mountains. Kishwar Nahid, none speaks here, no one wants to know. The words of speaking glances, the fish slipping from the hand, turns fear into hate. Kishwar Nahid, the desire to see you silent, billows up even from the grace, but speech is urgent. When listening is a crime, now I can see expressions which daunted me, strike fear everywhere. When it was urged many a decade ago for women to be writing their bodies into the text, the idea was only half welcome, but soon caught up, and eventually the English language primarily was flooding with women using a never-before-used set of vocabulary to write into text the feminine experience by women for women. English language is a relatively better equipped one, or has at least garnered a vocabulary. In other cases, this may not be the case. In Urdu, for instance, the conventional prose struggled to serve this purpose. A handful of female Urdu writers and poets took it upon themselves to find a voice, a new sensibility, to explore the lengths of an exhaustive and constructive Urdu vocabulary and explicate their experience against the backdrop of successive unbending patriarchal regimes.